Namaste everyone. Good afternoon. Today I would like to present to you all the role of a temple in Hindu Dharma. My name is Keerthana Kothapalli and I'm a junior from John P. Stevens High School in Edison, New Jersey. When I first began writing this paper, I was simply looking to uncover more information about this place that I go to at least one time every month. Throughout the research, however, I was able to uncover a minuscule portion of the grand scheme of things behind these temples, and I would like to share some of that with you today. My inspiration to write on this topic came from my grandfather, Dr. Kothapalli Ghanashyama Prasad Rao. He has done extensive research on Hindu temples and published a 4-book series on Hindu temples. On this slide, I've just listed some of the many facets of a Hindu temple that I would like to address today. I just want to start by saying, we all know that temples are important, and we all know that they play a huge role in our lives. But unfortunately, as I have come to realize, misinterpretation and misguided understanding has clouded our vision in regard to these temples. The inadequate comparison made between churches, mosques, and temples presents them in a simplified view that fails to address their complete value. By the end of this presentation, my hope is that everyone walks away with a little more knowledge about the vision behind Hindu temples as seen through the dharmic point of view. Before I begin talking about the temples themselves, I think it's necessary to acquaint ourselves with a few concepts of Hindu Dharma. Imagine waking up with a throbbing headache. You walk downstairs and take some ibuprofen, along with a cold glass of water, and then you continue with your day. You don't know how the ibuprofen helps you. You don't know how an orally taken pill could possibly treat a painful sensation in your head. Yet, you do not hesitate to swallow the pill. You simply have faith in the scientists and the pharmacists who are telling you to take it. Like this, throughout our lives, we partake in countless actions without knowing the reason behind them, simply satisfied with the outcome. In this way, Hindus visit temples with the same idea, even though they might not possess a full understanding of why, they are simply satisfied with gaining the benefits. In retrospect, when taking our constantly changing world into consideration, understanding the why aspect might be more of a necessity. Similar to the science behind ibuprofen that we know exists, a similar science exists as a foundation for Hindu temples. It is with this mindset that I would like to continue my humble attempt to introduce the science to you all. Despite the existing freedom to respectfully question and scrutinize, the lack of understanding regarding the why does not diminish anything's value or worth. Not knowing how ibuprofen works doesn't affect its ability to help you. Likewise, the inability to understand the science behind temples doesn't devalue them. People are given the opportunity to study and learn about the science if they choose, but even the people who simply abide by the set practices are presented with the full benefit as well. This is one of the things that really represents the essence of Hindu Dharma. It offers a seamless integration of material pursuit and spiritual growth for an individual or society, along with the freedom to be either fully aware or completely ignorant about the science and concepts behind them. The Hindu temple is one such marvel that I'd like to now talk more about. The basics of Hindu temples. To talk about a temple, we first have to talk about the concept of God. Who is God? What is God? Is it a who or a what? When talking about these things, it's necessary to consider the limitations of our human minds. The dharmic explanation of God acknowledges this. It is a widely held belief in the Western world that God created the universe, but the dharmic faith does not differentiate between the two. It proposes the idea of the creator becoming the creation. He is seen as the energy that sustains every aspect of our universe. Despite his infinite existence, it is impractical to just glance around and experience God. Due to the inability for people to simply see God, he has been explained in terms of a name and form, just like everything else in our universe. Nama Rupatmakam Jagat is a phrase that denotes the universe in terms of Nama and Rupa. Everything in the universe is visualized either by its Nama, its name, or its Rupa, its form. For example, we've been taught that a flower is called a flower and that it has a certain Rupa, stem, and petals. Similarly, when trying to connect to God, he can be understood through Saguna Upasana with Nama and Rupa, or Nirguna Upasana without Nama and Rupa. Guna means qualities, and Saguna Upasana directly translates to prayer through the identification of qualities. It is the predominant foundation behind any Hindu temple. Similar to how we see the nucleus of a cell through a microscope, Hindus can connect with God and experience divinity through a visit to a temple. Hindus use the temple as a point to connect with the infinite presence of God in the world around us. The three facets of a Hindu temple. The essence of a Hindu temple can be narrowed down into three key aspects: construction, consecration, and continuous daily worship. Before delving into the aspect of construction, let's first ask a simple question. Why do we even build temples? And why have so many been built? As per one explanation, according to the Hindu idea of moksha, which talks about the eventual state of liberation for every jiva, there is a necessity and responsibility for every jiva to come in contact with God across Janma Parampara, or cycles of life. In order to ensure that nobody would live in a place without having exposure to God, temples were often built first, with houses built around them. Traditionally, temples in India have been built with a science behind their construction, which has been prescribed in the Agama and Vastu Shastras. For example, taking a look at the human anatomy of the body from the dharmic point of view can help us draw many parallels between the human body and the structure of a temple. Deho devalaya prokto jivo deva sanatanaha tyajed ajnana nirmalyam soham bhavena pujayet. This sloka suggests a similarity between the human body and the temple. The human body is the upadhi for the inner dwelling Atman, similar to the temple structure hosting the main deity in the innermost sanctum sanctorum. Different parts of the temple structure correspond to different parts of the human body. Starting with the main entrance all the way to the innermost Garbhalayam, it is a representation of the body of the Lord. The human body consists of 5 koshas or layers, starting at an outermost layer all the way to the inner level, where the soul is held. They are called the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya koshas. Let's look a little bit more into each one right now. The temple's outer walls are often decorated with intricate, sometimes colorful carvings which depict gruesome images. These represent the Annamaya kosha, or the physical body. The Pranamaya kosha is represented by the walking paths of the temple, and they signify the spaces in our body that denote the flow of energy. The inner preking symbolize the Manomaya kosha, or the layer of the mind that controls one's senses through likes and dislikes. The inner Garbhagriha, or the sanctum sanctorum, signifies the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is the intellect that stands as a doorway to the world outside and also leads to the divine presence within. In the inner shrine of the Anandamaya kosha, or the sheath of bliss, stands the deity, which is shown to us during times of darshan. The deity represents pure consciousness, which is the essence of our own being. In turn, by seeing the deity, we are able to see our own self. The Hindu temple is set out according to ancient rules and teachings of the Vastu Shastra, with the Vastu Purusha Mandala as its controlling layout. It is a centered square diagram of either 8 by 8 or 9 by 9 squares, as you can see in the picture on the slide. Similar to the 5 koshas, another perspective of the human anatomy reveals the 7 chakras, or the energy centers in the body. The 7 chakras are the Mooladhara, Svadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Agnya, Vishuddhi, and Sahasrara. The Mooladhara chakra forms the starting point for our spiritual development. It is the bottommost rung from which we climb the ladder of the chakras. The activation of our karmas occurs in the Svadhisthana chakra, and it is here that we have the opportunity to purify them. The Manipura chakra is the center of vitality for the human body. It relates to the central hall of the temple and is usually left open and unoccupied. The Anahata chakra represents our inner temple, and in which the divine Atman resides. The Vishuddhi chakra functions as a purifying and detoxifying point in our body. Reaching the Sahasrara chakra signifies the complete development of our wisdom as we bridge to the divine consciousness. The awakening of the Sahasrara Chakra signifies the revelation of divine splendor and attainment of supreme consciousness. And when I said Sahasrara Chakra, I meant the Agnya Chakra. So reaching the Agnya Chakra signifies the complete development of our wisdom as we reach the bridge to the divine consciousness. As per the Agama Shastras, a temple structure is created to match the location of these chakras that we have just talked about in the human body. This is briefly displayed in the pictures shown on the slide, and they help us better understand the correlation between the two. Once the temple itself has been constructed, we move on to the murti inside, a representation of God through image form. The practice of Vigraha Aradhana is the worshipping of these murtis. Consecration is a process that allows for the worship of God through a murti. As opposed to common belief, Hindus are not idol worshippers. They do not worship the idol or the deity itself, but the divinity that is represented through the idol. Similar to how the transformation of mud into food is called agriculture, the transformation of stone into God is called consecration. The phenomenon of consecration is done through the understanding of the technology necessary to manifest the same divinity in different forms, whether that be a rock, a block of wood, or a part of nature. The Sanskrit term for consecration is prana pratishtha. Murti pratishtha is the process done to establish the main deity in the inner garbhagriha and invoke God in it through rituals and mantras as prescribed by the Pancharatra Agama Shastras. Hindus believe that after the Murti pratishtha process, the Murti is no longer simply a stone, but rather a living form of God. The events leading to Murti pratishtha involve elaborate processes with several steps each. Now I want to briefly talk about each step. First, a murti is shaped by the sculptor. As it leaves the artisan's workshop, a series of purification and energizing steps are performed. The first one is called Jaladivasam, in which the murti is immersed in sacred waters. Next, Dhanyadivasam is performed by covering the murti with whole grains of rice or wheat. The next one, Ghrutadivasam, is done by submerging the murti in cow ghee. Once all of these above steps are completed, the elaborate snapam or abhishek is performed. The next important step after abhishekam is netrana varanam. The artisan who sculpted the murti will now open the eyes of the murti using a golden needle. A 16th step upachara or seva puja is then performed and food is offered to the deity. Further rituals are performed before the murti is taken from the yajna mandap to the garbhagriha or the inner sanctum of the mandir and placed on the pedestal. Now, it's finally time for the prana pratishtha to be done through a process known as nyasa vidhi, which invokes various deities such as Brahma, Indra, and Surya, and others into different parts of the murti. First, the prana, or the breath of life, enters the murti, followed by the jiva, which loosely translates to the soul. Lastly, the 10 indriyas, or the senses, are infused into the murti. Now, we believe that God fully resides within the murti. On the contrary, it is noteworthy to also acknowledge another kind of temple known as Swayambhu temples. These temples contain self-manifested murtis, where the energy of God has manifested itself, taking a form naturally from the nature. It is lively with everlasting energy and does not require the elaborate process of prana pratishtha. Now let's move on to our last facet, continuous daily worship, or the maintenance aspect of the temple. Once a murti has been consecrated, the temple's central tower or gopuram must be purified and charged through a practice called kumbhabhishekam. It is a ritual to sanctify the kumbha shikara, the crown of the temple, with spiritually charged waters in a process known as abhishekam. This process can be compared to the periodic maintenance cycle prescribed for any scientific equipment or device. Next, I want to talk about the archakas, or the priests. In the temple, they perform daily rituals to the murti as prescribed in the Agama Shastra. All these activities and rituals are performed with utmost shraddha, consciously feeling the presence of a living God in the deity. The bhakta, who is a visitor to the temple, is expected to uphold a humble behavior as they go around the temple premises, adhering to prescribed practices with constant awareness of being at the feet of the Lord. All the meaningful practices for the visitor are designed in such a way as to encourage the submission of one's ego and of himself at the feet of the Lord, in order to ultimately experience oneness with Him. Unlike a mosque or a church, temples do not enforce a need for collective worship. There is no practice similar to that of a Catholic Mass, the central act of worship in a Roman Catholic church, and temples are not intended to serve the same purpose as a mosque, an Islamic house of worship. In fact, Swami Vivekananda, a great Hindu monk, claims that our temples are not churches or mosques. They are not places of public worship, for, properly speaking, there is no such thing as public worship in India. For any individual, simply coming to the temple and spending time in the consecrated energy can have an immense benefit. Modeling how a particle reacts when entering a charged magnetic field, similarly, humans purify themselves simply by entering the temple area. Though the primary purpose behind a temple is not intended to serve a specific social or economic objective, the temple indeed serves a significant role in those areas. Through the ages, large temple complexes built in the middle of cities and along the banks of sacred rivers became epicenters of public gatherings, stimulating social and economic activity around them. For example, during the time of famine and flood, some kings would extend temple premises as shelters for the needy. Temples also served as congregation centers for Vedic chanting and performing arts. They soon donned many other roles, like a place of learning, a medical center, a courthouse, and even a cow sanctuary, to name a few. As the life of a Hindu is intertwined with the year-round festivals, temples have become the de facto center for social gatherings and celebrations during the festive season. The temple-dependent livelihood also provided a need for skilled labor and talented artists in order to construct these massive temples over years, if not decades. Temples also became major tourist attractions due to both their enormous size and admirable work of art, apart from being the abode of the Almighty. Economic activity flourished around temples as well, stimulated by visiting tourists and pilgrims. A self-serving small business ecosystem provided a natural means of employment for many families and communities. Though it happened as a natural consequence, any amount of acknowledgement would be inadequate to highlight the socio-economic and cultural role temples have played to nourish the societies around them. With so much diversity in languages and customs across the nation, famous temples stood as the pillars for India's cultural unity. The age-old tradition of a complete Hindu pilgrimage encompasses a round trip across the entire length of the country, from Rameshwaram to Kasi, connecting people physically and spiritually. The role and purpose of temples in the spiritual and cultural upliftment of our society are immense and beyond comprehension. This presentation was my humble attempt to bring you all to the doorstep of exploration, giving you the means to uncover more for yourself. Sorry about that. Thank you all for listening today. Namaste.